Illusion, Chapter 1. The air was warm and smelled sweet. He recognized that smell. Liam quickly opened his eyes and saw that he was in the den. He had somehow made it to the couch, but the last thing he remembered, he was saying something to his mother, and that was it. Could she have carried me by herself? He thought to himself as he got up and pulled the blankets off of him. He caught another whiff of that familiar, sweet aroma and finally noticed a tall mug sitting on the table. He could tell it was his mother's famous hot chocolate. He quickly took the mug and began to chug it, not caring how hot it was. It was barely warm. He also noticed that the fire had been going. He looked outside and noticed that the sun had gone down. He guessed that he must have been out for a few hours. That was when he remembered the two people or things that were chasing him. He called out for his mother, but no answer. He thought she might be upstairs and just couldn't hear him, so he put the not-so-hot chocolate down and headed upstairs. Thankfully, the den was close to the stairs. He still felt a bit weak, but he felt good enough to go short distances. He got up the steps and immediately noticed a ladder in the hallway. He didn't even know they had an attic. He called to his mother again, and still no answer. He slowly walked up to the ladder and tried calling for her again. He knew she must be up there, but he used up most of his strength walking up the stairs. He repeatedly called up when she finally popped her head down. His mother had long, flowing blonde hair and beautiful blue eyes. He couldn't believe that she was his mother. Her looks were flawless. "What do you want?" She pulled her head back and climbed down. "It's good to see you're awake, but you should still be resting." She put the ladder up, and it sat flush with the ceiling. If you didn't already know it was there, it would look like part of the ceiling. "Why don't you go into your room and lay down? I'll make you a new mug and I'll bring it up to you." Knowing she was right, he went to his room that sat right at the end of the hallway. Inside was just the right size for him. It was also quite a mess. He was also always too exhausted from the walk home to clean. He had a PlayStation 3 hooked up to an old 15-inch screen, so the picture quality wasn't very great. That sat on a wooden box he had found outside in an alley one day. His bed wasn't really a bed, but a futon. He would use it as a couch when he wasn't sleeping, and then pull it out when he went to bed. He also had a little mat he would sleep on top when he couldn't stand to feel the bars underneath. He then did what he was told and pulled the blankets out and set up his bed. By the time he had finished and laid down, his mother walked in the door. "Careful, it may still be too hot to drink." She handed him the mug and sat down beside him. The weight of both on one end caused the bed to tip slightly, but she didn't move. She had a look of concern on her face. He had never passed out before, and the words he said right before had left her curious. She let him take his first drink before she asked him what had happened. "Well, I was on my way home when I heard fighting coming from an alley." He took another sip and put it down on the armrest. "Normally, I would have just kept walking, but something was telling me to look and see what was going on." He shivered after remembering what he saw. "I got up against the wall and leaned my head around the corner. What I saw, I'm not sure if it was real or just my imagination, but the two men that were fighting, from what I saw, turned into hideous creatures. One man was huge and really buff. He turned into a pig with a snout and tusks. The other guy was pretty scrawny. When he changed before my eyes, he looked just like a skeleton." He pointed over to his broken bag that his mother had most likely brought up while he was asleep. "And if the strap had not snapped, I wouldn't have been chased by them." His mother just kissed his forehead, even though he was almost 20, picked up the mug, and began to head out the door. "There are things that I can teach you, and there are things that only you can discover." She closed the door, and without her son seeing, she began to cry. She knew that this was bound to happen. She walked down the stairs, washed the dishes, and put the fire out before heading to bed herself. The next morning, Liam awoke to rain pounding his window like rocks. Not only was it raining, but it was cold too. Although still shaken up about yesterday, he knew he had to go to school anyways. He quickly got up and got dressed. After he dressed, he got some tape and temporarily patched up his school bag. He rushed downstairs, and as he walked into the kitchen, he saw one of his friends helping themselves to a stack of waffles. "What are you doing here?" He dropped his bag on the floor and sat down in the seat opposite. With bright red hair, brown eyes, and a beautiful face, it was hard to believe his friend was a tomboy. Yes, Nicky was his childhood friend, They did pretty much everything together. Just as he thought about this, she stuffed her face with a fork full of waffles. He put his hand on his face and just shook his head. He couldn't believe how she became the way she is now. Could you pass me the syrup? She completely ignored his question, poured on the syrup, and kept on eating. She finished her plate in no time, while Liam hadn't even touched his. He didn't really feel like eating, not with the thought of passing through the area that he was chased from yesterday. Although the choice was stupid, he chose not to eat. Just because it was raining and he'd be walking with a friend, he still didn't feel safe. He just wanted to get the day over. Nikki got up and Liam followed. They were at the door when she finally decided to answer Liam's question. You want to know why I stopped by? She picked up an umbrella and opened it up inside. 3 of the ribs had broken somehow. I was hoping you had an extra one. Liam didn't know what her motive was, but he had a feeling she had done it on purpose. He knew that she knew he only had one. He just humored her and opened his. They walked outside, and Nikki immediately huddled up close so she could stay dry. Liam decided to leave the current issue be and attempt to change the subject. So last night I was chased by 2 drunks that apparently didn't look human to me. He tried to laugh it off, as if it was a joke, but Nikki wasn't seeing it that way. She could sense that somehow what he was trying to say was true. Not wanting to cause him any more stress, she decided to leave the matter alone for the day. She could see his mind wandering. She could only imagine what he went through. As she thought about what could have happened, Liam stopped dead in his tracks, but she kept moving. She was soaked before she got back under the umbrella. Sorry. Liam was just staring at the other side of the bridge that was just ahead of them. It was just on the other side there. He pointed to the dark street that sat just on the other side. I was chased up to that point. I don't know why, but they just stopped when I started across the bridge. Oh, come on. Nikki grabbed his bag and pulled him along. Liam was hesitant at first, but finally gave in. He knew that there was no stopping her when she started something. He got a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach as they crossed. He looks at his friend's face as they finally hit the other side. Moreover, what made him think more was the rain had stopped once they crossed. They were both glad it did, but Liam was a bit curious. Maybe it was his fear that made him as cautious as he was, but he still felt something was strange about that rain stopping. If you don't hurry, we'll be late to school. Nikki was far ahead of him. She was ready to get to school so she could change out of her wet clothes and into her gym outfit. Although they didn't have a traditional gym class, they still had to wear those white shirts and shorts and sweats in the winter. When not practicing swordplay, she didn't even bother to wait. She turned back around and kept on going. This had left Liam no other choice but to follow her lead. He had to rush to catch up, but she wasn't that far ahead. They both looked around and saw the damage left by the heavy rain. The gutters and drains were flooded, the curbs looked like small rivers, and even some shop signs were flickering on and off as well as waterlogged. They both realized how much worse this side of town was. Their side was mainly residential, while this side was mostly business. They had no time to linger and think how bad things could really be. They picked up the pace and continued on their way. They had eventually come to the alley that Liam was chased from, but he didn't bother saying anything else. He just sucked it up and quickened his pace. Once past, he slowed down. He had decided not to say anything else about what happened until after classes. He thought that maybe he wouldn't be stressed out by then. Well, stressed out about that anyways. To think that there may be something else out there made him cringe. They didn't even look friendly as humans. He then started to remember how his mother had told him that it was up to him to discover things on his own. He knew that she knew something. He would have to try to get an answer out of her later that day when he gets home. The more Liam thought about what happened, the more he felt his mind changing. His fear was still there, but now a sense of duty was beginning to rise. Why would I feel this way? What duty could I possibly have? What did you say? Nikki had heard Liam mumbling and turned to check on her friend. It was as if he didn't hear her. Hello, is anyone in there? She shook her head and got back to walking. I swear, you can be weirder than even me sometimes. Liam finally realized what she was trying to say. Nothing at all. I'm just thinking to myself, was all he could really come up with at the moment. Luckily, the academy was just ahead. The place was surrounded by a large concrete wall. They had to show a pass proving that they go there. All children, teens, and young adults are required to attend. However, there are those that either flunked out or expelled. Those special people are banned from the grounds. Leon went to reach into his bag for his pass. He rummaged through while still walking. He couldn't feel it. It couldn't have. Leon remembered dropping papers yesterday. In his rush, he just thought it was his homework. They got to the guard station that separated the outside world from what felt like to them a giant jail for kids and young adults. However, he didn't have time to worry about that now. Pass, please. The guard stuck out his hand to receive the next student's paper. Nicky was the first to give him the pass. Everything checks out. You may enter. I'll meet you in homeroom. Nicky continued on and left Liam alone to his little issue. Inside the walls were 3 buildings that separated the grade levels 1 to 5, 6 to 12, and then 13 to 16. Out front, leading from the gate to the 3 buildings, was a giant garden. It was beautiful with many species of plants. Behind the 3 buildings was a large field. It was built for sports as well as whenever students had free time in between classes. Do you have your pass or not? The guard was getting impatient. He was tapping his feet in his frustration. Most of the students may have already been through the process, but it was getting close to the bell ringing. No matter how hard he searched, he could not find it. Luckily, the guard knew him, and they had another way to verify. Liam was directed towards a set of chairs. The ones that could not present proof would be escorted to the head of the academy for extensive questioning, and if they passed, they would be given a new pass if need be, and sent to their classrooms. Students lost their passes all the time, but he felt a bit embarrassed because this was the first time he lost his. He was hoping that those guys he saw didn't have it. Not only did it have your name and date of birth, it also had his address and phone number. Just the thought made him sweat. As the last student got through, the guard walked over and commanded the ones that were in the chairs to get up. There weren't that many that day. He pointed towards the buildings, and everyone knew exactly where to go. They lined up and walked down a large path that led through the garden. Liam was just hoping that it wouldn't take long. He couldn't afford to miss certain classes. Down the path and into the middle building, which was also for grades 6 to 12, the students walked quickly and quietly. Thankfully, the dean's office was on the bottom floor. It would make it easier to get out and walk over to his building when he was done. Behind them, they were being watched. No one looked like they were about to do anything, but Liam thought it was better to be safe than sorry. Inside, the front of the building was large, with an area for students to sit and rest during lunch or between classes, a vending area for quick snacks, and a receptionist. This was obviously a major hub for students. The building for the higher grade levels didn't have all this, but he didn't complain. It somehow made sense to him why the buildings were set up differently and had different privileges. They went down the hallway to their right, and their destination was right at the end. They were instructed to stand against a wall until it was their turn. Liam was fourth in line. He was happy yet nervous at the same time. He saw the first student go in, and not 3 minutes later walk back out. Okay, looks like this will be quick, he whispered to himself as he heard the dean call for the next student. His worries started to fade as the second student came out and the third went in. This one was taking longer than the others were. Nevertheless, he didn't care, as long as his was quick. He thought that the kid might be having trouble answering questions. He knew it happened sometimes, like when people get nervous and are put on the spot. He then saw the door open and the kid walking out. The kid, though, didn't look too happy. He wondered what had happened. However, he had no time to think about that as he heard the dean yell for the next student to enter. He slowly walked up to the door and turned the knob, and with a quick motion he entered the office.